Hey everyone, Pastor George here. Very excited to be with all of you this morning as we do another new thing. And man, I have to say, I was inspired this morning, or really yesterday. I've been reading this book, which I'll get more into later, The Truth and Beauty by Andrew Klavan. So good. That's what inspired me to do this, and I'll talk about why. But just let you know, I'm going to be talking about book stuff. So let's start off. Let's start off with our normal way we do this. We're going to look at the book of Proverbs here. Let me pull up my screen so you guys can see what I'm talking about here. All right. So, that's a little of a preview there. All right. So, our thing comes from the book of Proverbs, our Bible lesson today. It's Proverbs 18:14 through 15. And I'll go ahead and read it for us. It says, "The human spirit can endure in sickness, but a crushed spirit who can bear? The heart of the discerning acquires knowledge, for the ears of the wise seek it out." The book of Proverbs is just full of stuff like this, but here you can see it uses one of its favorite words, which is wisdom. The book of Proverbs can be broken up basically into two big sections. The first 9 chapters or so are all about the pursuit of wisdom, or, well, not the pursuit, that's the second part, the call to wisdom. So like why becoming wise is important. So in the first 9 chapters it talks about, this is the benefits of wisdom, seeking wisdom out, right? And in basically the last half of the book, the majority of it, 10 to 31, is all about the life of wisdom, right? How do you live as a wise person? So basically it's setting itself up, right? The first 10 chapters tell you why the last 20 or 30 chapters, 21 chapters are important, right? So that's what the book of Proverbs, how it's designed. And as it says in the title, right, it says Proverbs, and it has to do with seeking these seeking wisdom from these famous sayings that have been kind of recorded. And if you've been in the book of Proverbs, there's all sorts of funny stuff that's in there. Like a dog returns to its vomit, so to a fool returns to folly, right? To his folly. It was a famous one. Like it's better to live in the corner of your roof than with a quarrelsome wife, right? There's like some funny stuff in there. Of course, there's the famous thing like a Proverbs 31 talking about women who are wise and things like that. But it's just that's just what it's about, right? And so I think that these 2 verses go really well with what I want to talk to you guys about today. And the first one has to do with a little bit later, and so I think we'll come back to that. But one of the things I think is really important is 15, where it says, "The heart of the discerning acquires knowledge, for the ears of the wise seek it out." One of the problems I view with a lot of people, myself included, is summed up really well by the phrase that my seminary professor used one time when he was preaching, and it's so good because it's true. He was talking about the Exodus and how there's that famous part of the Exodus where the Hebrews get out and they're like, you know what, we would rather go back to Egypt where we were slaves than die out here in the desert. And he responded to that by quoting kind of this proverb, I guess, that either he coined or he heard somewhere else, where he said, people prefer the misery that they know to the mystery that they don't, right? People always, generally I see, prefer misery or things that they know and are comfortable with than to the new. And that is, I think, not a biblical way to carry ourselves in the world. And I really try and live this out in just about everything I do, and I think all Christians should. I think that this requires you to put yourself out there and always be trying new things and trying to grow. And I say that because that directly, this thing in 15, right? The heart of the discerning acquires knowledge, for the ears of the wise seek it out. You want to go find new things, new experiences, interact with new ideas. It's really important. I would say anywhere from food to music to all sorts of different art to different challenging ways of viewing the world, from philosophy and sociology and things like that. And of course, we only have so much time. So, you're never going to know everything in the world. But I think it's really important that that is something that we are called to do. And that's why I really push a lot of you guys in different various things, classes or Bible studies or whatever, to really go beyond easy answers that we usually have been given, right? Because I think that if I'm supposed to be equipping you guys for service in the world, then you guys have to be properly equipped, right? You can't just rely on the clergy to do all the thinking or other people to do all the thinking. You have to do the thinking, because at the end of the day, if you're ministering to someone, I'm not there, right? Tim Keller isn't there. Paul the Apostle isn't there. Christ is with you in spirit and will give you the words that you need, but you are there, right, as his ambassador. And so you have to be able to talk to people and answer these questions and interact with people in a normal way and in a way that is meaningful to them. And in that respect, right, we go back to 14. The human spirit can endure sickness, but a crushed spirit who can bear? And this is why I think it is so important. This is going to be kind of our main focus for today, I guess, this is why I think it's so important to interact with art. This is why I'm not an artist. I really can't make anything when it comes to drawing or painting or music or anything like that. Maybe you could say I'm a writer, but I don't even want to claim that title, right? It's just, I think it's so important to interact with things. And I'm going to use two examples for us today that I think are helpful in this. But the reason I think 14 applies here and it falls really well into 15 is that I think interacting with art gives you a bigger soul. And what I mean by that is to interact with a movie, right, or a story means that we have to, one, take ourselves out of our life and put ourselves there in that moment, right? It also usually requires us, if we are going to really empathize with people, to take our own thoughts and opinions about things and put them to the side. Doesn't mean that we aren't, discerning or anything like that, but we just have to take our normal life and kind of put it to the side and live into someone else's story for an hour, 2 hours, right? And you really do this with all art. It's just movies are the easiest to do this with, but you can apply this to video games and to art in the museum and to music and things like that. And you see things through this person's perspective on the world. And when you interact with stories, especially really good ones, they really challenge your worldview in a way that maybe you didn't think so, right? Because in our stories, our heroes can become villains, right? Our villains can be redeemed. Things change and it's hard to tell. And so interacting with these things and moving out really grows your soul in a way that when you step back into reality, right, you're able to take the helpful things from that and apply it to the life that you're living. And how would you interact with those situations, right? It pulls you out of really easy things to do. And this is why, it's really good to every once in a while challenge yourself with something new, something you wouldn't ordinarily watch or interact with. And so, I think doing that is very important. And so let's move on to my first example. So my first example of how this is helpful comes from Wicked, the musical Wicked, which is a great musical. The book is terrible. So if you're going to interact with this, I would prefer you to watch the play. And it's not even terrible. I'm not talking about morally or whatever, although it is kind of dark and a little risque, the book, but it's actually just not good. It's just not a good novel. So it's more of a don't waste your time reading it type of thing. And it has nothing to do really with the content, just more to do with the style and the not good way it was written. But for those of you who don't know what Wicked is about, although it's very popular, it's basically a origin story for Glinda and the Wicked Witch of the West. And it's basically, talks about how they were friends and then things happened and they fell apart. And it's actually become so famous that I think it's basically the unofficial. It's unofficially been added to the Wizard of Oz canon, where like the Wizard of Oz uh, was a book and then turned into a movie, and the movie is kind of like the official version for our culture, right? I think Wicked is like the official version of the origin to the movie, even though obviously like this was written decades and decades after the original. Like I think like Wizard of Oz was late 1800s, early 1900s was when that was written. Wicked was written in like 1990 something, so like 90 years later. And so even though they're completely written by different authors and different things, like they've ended up becoming just such big cultural forces that they're part of it. So anyway, in Wicked, right, there's a character, a guy named Fiyero, who comes on pretty early, and he's kind of like this rich guy, and he it just like is kind of a wastrel. He moves from school to school and just does kind of whatever he wants. He doesn't try, and his whole thing when he shows up is he sings a song called "Dancing Through Life," which is a really good song. I'd play it for you, but we'd get copyright struck. And in the song, he sings about how it's really important just to not take life too seriously, just go through it, because when you go through it, you're easily able to just take what life gives you, right? It's when you think, bad things happen. Don't think about things, right? Just go on, right? Don't have to worry about it. And he has this one line where he talks about how he tells them to learn to live the unexamined life, right? That's what he says. Learn to live the unexamined life. And that's obviously a play on an old proverb, right? Which is the unexamined life is not worth living. This is something that is said. And so he says the opposite. He goes and he says the opposite. Now you have to watch the play to find out, whether that's true or not true or things like that. But I think about that pretty often. The song's really good. But the reason I think about it is because so many of us do live the unexamined life. This is something that I've really learned. This is why this Proverbs passage that I have here is so important, right? The heart of the discerning acquires knowledge, and the ears of the wise seek it out. A lot of people, I think, don't try and find these things. And that's exactly why, scripture is so criminally underread. Because even if you were agnostic or secular, the Bible is still such an important piece of cultural work that I thought it would, behoove everyone to go out and actually try and learn about it. It's way more important than any other book as far as the construction of civilization and things like that, right? And if you're going to be studying like literature, it's almost foolhardy and a waste of time to not be familiar with the Bible at some level, because so many things make reference to it. You're losing something when you don't do it. And for many Christians, you might have been nodding your head and going along with that and going, yeah, you know what, that's really true. A lot of people need to study it more. But then it's like, why don't you or we challenge ourselves by studying more from outside of our view system, right? That's what I spend my time trying to do a lot of the time, right? I read a lot of books by Christians. I mean, The Truth and Beauty right here is by a Christian, but I still think that, it's really important. The reason I'm talking about this is because in The Truth and Beauty, it's The Truth and Beauty, I'll read the whole title, How the Lives and Works of England's Greatest Poets Point the Way to a Deeper Understanding of the Words of Jesus. So it's all about looking at these guys called the Romantics, which was a poetic movement in the 1800s, and this would be people like Lord Byron, people like the Shelleys, so Percy Shelley, the husband, and Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, and their whole group, Coleridge and people like that. And I was not really familiar with these people because when you study them, right, like I knew some of their stuff from school, I think. And from video games a little bit too, actually, funnily enough. But like, I learned about their personal lives, and a lot of them were just like complete. There were a lot of them. And here, I'll move on to a poem by Shelley, but I'll just pull this up so you can see kind of what he looks like. in is the that a lot of them are kind of just wastrels. Like they're young people in their 20s, and they are kind of these revolutionary minds, very focused on the future, like remaking society, as a lot of young people are. And and they end up, just sleeping around with a bunch of people. Like all of them guys like cheat on their wives, and they end up having lots of kids that they don't take care of and things like that. And he talks about that in this book, but he loves them still. He thinks their poetry is really good. And I just looked at their personal lives and just went, I don't really care. Maybe if I find a good poem by them, I'll read it, but I'm not going to go out and try and seek out any of the romantics. They seem like complete wastes of time. That's basically how I viewed them. And this book taught me that was a really unfair or not a healthy way of engaging with the material, right? Because you just look at the person and not at the substance of what they're providing, even if they think they're wrong. Like he talks about multiple times in the book, like this is a wrong thing to think. But how does this help us understand the words of Jesus that we can bring to other people, right? Because regardless of whether or not we agree with our ideas or whatever, a lot of people think this way, especially young people, but even not just young people, right? So what does the word of Jesus have to say to them? And he does a really good job of like looking at the poems in depth and talking about them and things like that. So it's a great book. I'd highly recommend it. Right now it's my book of the year. We're only in March, so you never know what's going to happen, but it really is good. And so I wanted to read Ozymandias for us. This is one of my favorite poems of all time. And it just so happened to be by Percy Shelley, who I didn't really care about all that much until quite recently. So I'm going to read it for you guys. And I'm not a great dictat or anything like that in terms of being able to intone poetry, but I will try my best here. So this is Ozymandias by Percy Shelley, and let me zoom in here for you guys so you can read along with me if you want to. I wish this top part would go away. That's very annoying. All right. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert, near them on the sand." And I'll give my commentary as we kind of go through this. So Ozymandias, in case you don't know this name, is just the Greek name for Ramesses II. Ramesses II was the pharaoh of Egypt, very famous. I'm sure you know who he is. He's the one that they always say was with Moses, although there's no historical evidence for that. So he said, I met a traveler from an antique land. So he talks to someone who has been to this foreign ancient place, right? Antique. Who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert, near them on the sand." So in the desert, presumably Egypt, there are two legs of stone standing by themselves, right? No top. And near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies. So a shattered visage, a visage is a face, right? So a face is lying in the desert, half sunken in. So, you can imagine it, right? Just kind of the sand is about halfway through. Whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. So you see it, and he looks angry, right? He has a wrinkled lip. He has a sneer of cold command. He's a powerful ruler, someone you should fear, right? And the sculptor who made it knew these things. And they even on these lifeless things, you can still see that. The hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. So this idea that this person has complete and total control over their lives, right? Feeds them and mocks them. He holds them to scorn, that type of thing. Really powerful ruler. And on the pedestal, these words appear. And on the pedestal of the legs, right? The shattered body, half of it's in the sand. The legs are standing on. There's a pedestal in front of it. It says, on the pedestal, these words appear. This is the famous line from this. "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Great poem. And and I think it comes down to being able to understand, right, what he's saying here. So you picture this, right? You picture the legs by themselves on a pedestal in the middle of a desert, nothing else around. Shattered head in the sand. On the pedestal, it says, "Look on my works. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains." So, what is this about? Well, what it's saying is, back in the day, right, this person was really powerful and strong. And probably that these places were full of beautiful and magnificent buildings, right? People should be afraid of this person. But what has happened? They're all gone, right? Time has marched on. This person who was once really powerful has been shattered and is now in the sand. And this comes from this statue right here. This is the younger Memnon is what it's called, but it's a statue of Ramses that the British brought back from Egypt. And so what happened is Percy Shelley and a friend saw this statue in the British Museum, and they decided to both write poems about it. And Ozymandias is the poem that Shelley wrote. Like, there's, as far as I know, there's not a pedestal with those words, right? Shelley is an artist; he's making things up. But what he's seeing when he says this, right? If is he saying, time moves forward, powerful people from the past aren't powerful anymore, and you can build a whole life and think you're the bee's knees, think you're the most powerful person, but at the end of time, the sands of time will just wash it away. And I think that this is such a powerful poem to say this. Now, Shelley, of course, was this revolutionary. He's a super atheist, and challenged the authority of everyone, right? So you can, if you read it with that lens, what is he saying? He's saying all of these structures we put in place, they're all going to go away, we should not be afraid to overturn these things. But at the same time, right, it's just this natural truth that time just covers things in sand, right? Things are covered over, and this is why we call them the sands of time. It even has this idea not only of time trickling like an hourglass, but covering the past. And so I think that it's just a really powerful poem that, if you didn't maybe have someone like me to go through it with you, maybe it wouldn't have been as useful or something like that. But what does this to help us do? Well, one, this helps us to understand Shelley's perspective, but it also relays to us biblical truth, right? As Christians, the point of this poem is very in line with what Scripture says, right? It talks about life being a wisp, right? Not storing up for yourselves things on earth, not building more barns, right? And as Christians, we would go, oh yeah, that's 100% the way that we should live our lives. And so I think really that is a really powerful way for us to view our lives and the work of people. And there's lots of great stuff like this out there that really help us to think about things through a different lens and maybe communicate biblical truth in a way that's meaningful to people or makes it more meaningful to us. Now when I think, anytime, for a long time since I've encountered this poem, when I think about parts of the Bible that talk about our life being a wisp, I think of Ozymandias, because it's exactly about this. And maybe that's just how I think about things. That's fine, but when you interact with art, that's where it goes. So I just thought that was important thing to say. I have a lot of questions down the pipeline, like a lot, and I'm really trying to figure out how to divvy them up. So I'm not going to answer any today, partly because I didn't think about any of the answers yet, because it's been a little bit of a busy week for me. I apologize for that. So I'm going to cut it short today, but short being a very relative term, honestly, because it's been 25 minutes almost. But I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. I look forward to seeing all of you on Sunday for True Reformation Sunday. Very excited for that. Talk about expanding our horizons, right? Going back to the past, because I'm a true traditionalist. You can talk about how we're supposed to have whatever color paraments, or we've always sung such and such a hymn or whatever. But as soon as I bring back the originals, that's when everyone starts to throw up their hands and be like, oh, this is new. No, it's old and it's original. So challenge yourself a little bit this Sunday and join us for True Reformation Sunday. I'm excited to be there with you guys, and just to enjoy each other's company and worship as we worship God. So looking forward to it. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday, and peace out.